This Diplomat Diaries is very special given that we have the ambassador of Denmark to India with us to discuss a lot of things. A lot of things are going on in Europe. A lot of things are happening in India-Denmark relationship, but a lot of things are also happening in India-EU relationship, as well as EU redefining its role in the world. So it's with great pleasure and honor. It's my great pleasure and honor to have His Excellency with us this afternoon. Excellency, if I may ask you to take yours. So as we usually do for these sessions, we'll have Excellency Kristensen talk about the changing world order, changing India-Denmark relationship, changing India-EU relationship, also a bit on how things are unfolding in DC and its impact on the global order, perhaps also because it is impacting both India and the EU. But in particular, I think what we have seen in India-Denmark relationship, which is now, which has transformed itself into a green strategic partnership, how that is unfolding, what are some of the ambitions that have been set by the two sides, and how the two sides are galvanizing the bureaucracies on both sides to achieve those objectives. We are here to discuss those aspects, as well as the dynamic involved in presently navigating very turbulent times emanating from Washington, both for India, for EU, for European security architecture, as well as for Indian foreign policy. So there are a number of issues on the table, which I'm sure we'll go into during the conversation and question and answers. But first, let me invite formally His Excellency Kristensen for his initial remarks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Pant, and thank you so much to the ORIF for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here today. Also, very nice crowd. So thank you all for coming. I think what I will do is to say a little bit about the Denmark-India relationship, how it has unfolded over the past few years, and then also turn a little bit to the broader EU-India agenda, where Denmark currently holds the rotating presidency of the European Council. I think both points should be quite interesting when it comes to India. But if we start with the Denmark-India relationship, I'm a relatively new Danish ambassador to India. I came about 6 months ago and enjoying it very much, not least because I think the bilateral relationship between the two countries are on a very strong foundation, not least due to the strategic partnership that the two countries agreed upon back in 2020. It is not just a strategic partnership, it is a green strategic partnership, and I think also India's first green strategic partnership, so the first time that label has been used to sort of characterize a bilateral relationship with another country. The partnership is comprehensive in nature, in the sense that Denmark and India works together across a number of sectors. But sustainability is really a sort of a common thread, a defining part of the cooperation in all areas. So it's climate, it's energy, it's water, it's maritime affairs, it's food and agriculture, healthcare, science, technology, and many other areas. And I think the cooperation model that we have developed over time in some ways is a little bit unique. Because we have many years ago moved away, at least in our relationship with India, from what you could dub sort of traditional development assistance. That is no longer what we are talking about here. It is an equal partnership, and it's very much based on peer-to-peer learning and cooperation on very concrete projects. We're of course not, as Denmark, here to teach and preach, but we're here to perhaps inspire, and certainly to be inspired. I think Denmark can learn a lot from India. And what that means in practice is that in all these areas I mentioned, we have practitioners from Denmark being teamed up with practitioners here, so the people who work on these issues on a daily basis, whether it's from a regulatory point of view or a business point of view or a technological point of view, to sit together and find common ground and not least discuss what we can learn from each other. I think, in my view, when we talk about the green strategic partnership, Denmark's main value proposition for India is perhaps our experience over time with achieving a cost-efficient green transition. Climate change is, I think, despite the turbulence geopolitically at the moment, is still the most consequential challenge of our time. And while we can all agree on the need to decarbonize and reach net zero as soon as possible, it's also clear that it has to be done in a cost-efficient manner, in a manner that where fighting climate change will not take place at the expense, for example, of India's right to develop. And I think our point is, nor does it have to. And that is really key. India, in many ways, has scale. I think that's what the country can offer in many ways. And when that scale is leveraged, it can also help bring down costs of green technologies, of the green transition. I think we've seen it particularly in the area of solar, where India has made impressive progress in its deployment of solar power. It is now the cheapest form of energy available in India, and India has already achieved its target for renewable energy well ahead of time. And I think this is a good example of what happens when things are deployed at scale here. Costs come down and things go up very fast. So Denmark is partnering with India to achieve the same, if you like, in other areas, whether it's offshore wind, bioenergy, hydrogen and other clean fuels, or waste to energy. But we also have some experience in how you manage an energy system with a lot of fluctuating or intermittent renewable energy. Denmark currently has more than 70% wind in our grid at all times. This is on average. We have days where it's more than 100%, and we've managed to handle that without any particular problems. So this is something skills that we are trying to also demonstrate here in India. And India then will have to bring it to scale, and this is what India can give the rest of the world. Another example could be the water sector, where India has 70% of the world's population, but you only have 3% of the world's water resources. So you're a water scarce country. And this is perhaps, again, an area where we cooperate and we can learn from each other. I think what Denmark has learned through our cooperation with India when it comes to water is some really innovative technologies, also easy to deploy, and we take that home. What we perhaps can inspire India to do is, for example, reduce its water loss. In most Indian cities, 40% of the water is lost in the piping system. It's completely wasted. In Denmark, that's down to about 3%. So if India could then copy what we have managed to do, then you would save a lot of water. So this is one of the areas we cooperate on. Wastewater treatment could be another one, where we are working with Indian partners to make wastewater treatment plants, if not energy positive, at least energy neutral. And this again would dramatically improve the business case for investing in more wastewater treatment plants in India. Denmark is also a big investor in India. We have more than 220 companies with a presence in the country, and Danish companies overall employ well more than 100,000 people. It's within manufacturing. We invest in capability centers, logistics, ports, shipping, retail services. You know some of the brands already, whether it's Carlsberg beer, if you enjoy that, Lego toys, Novo Nordisk makes medicine for diabetes. So we have Maersk, DSV, two of the world's largest shipping and logistics companies. And it's increasingly high-end. I think that's another thing I found interesting. Denmark, for example, has some of the world's largest engineering advisory service companies, and they are well positioned here, both for the Indian market, but they actually also make use of the great talent that is available in India. So I went to one of them, Covi. It's a big Danish engineering company, and I was surprised to see that they are currently designing a bridge in my old hometown in Denmark, 5 minutes drive from my father's house, and that is actually being designed here in India. I don't think anyone really understands that back in Denmark, but I think it's a good example of how we as countries work together and how things are increasingly globalized. Tech, IT, another area of cooperation. We do a lot of work with startups. Denmark is next week, in fact, hosting the India-Nordic Startup Summit in Copenhagen. We have an innovation center in Bangalore to promote joint research. And I think, again, an area where Denmark can learn a lot from India. And this also perhaps emphasizes that it's not a one-way street. Many Indian companies are actually at the moment investing in Denmark, and I really like that fact as well. Infosys, Tata, L&T, many others, and they see Copenhagen as a bridge to Northern Europe. That also manifests itself in an increasing number of direct flights, whether it's India, SAS, or Indigo. And I think that's all extremely positive. If we then turn to the broader EU-India agenda, as I said in the beginning, Denmark is currently holding the rotating presidency of the European Council. The motto we have chosen for our presidency is Strong Europe in a Changing World, which I think nicely encapsulates some of the challenges that Europe faces at the moment. But certainly we'll do what we can to make sure that Europe can rise to those challenges. And the main priorities then for us, and in fact I think shared across Europe, is first and foremost defense and security. Europe needs to stand on its own feet when it comes to security. Competitiveness, another very important issue. We need a competitive economy. And finally, let's not forget, as I said, you can easily do so in current times, that we still have a challenge when it comes to the green transition. We need to get to net zero, and I think we are slowly, both here in India and Europe, now starting to see the first consequences of what will in fact be very dramatic climate change in the years to come. In any case, for the Danish presidency and for Europe, I think India will play a key role going forward. If anyone was in doubt whether Europe is interested in India and wants India as a partner, hopefully those concerns were dismissed already back in February, the same month as I came, when the European Commission, so all the European commissioners, basically with Commission President von der Leyen taking the lead, was here in India on a trip. And I don't think that has ever happened before in EU's history, at least not to one country, simply one bilateral country, that the whole Commission has showed up. And I think that's at least symbolic in the sense that it shows that Europe is really interested in developing our relations with India. So Denmark, of course, fully supports the ongoing negotiations for an EU-India free trade agreement. We very much hope that it can be concluded this year, not just because it would be nice if that happens during the Danish EU presidency, but simply, but more importantly, because reaching such a deal would be tremendously beneficial for both the EU and for India. And this was what was agreed between Prime Minister Modi and Commission President von der Leyen. And as far as I understand, the negotiations are progressing smoothly. And as I said, we hope they can be concluded. Europe has a lot to offer India. Again, it's sometimes a little bit overlooked, especially if you just look at Europe as, individual countries and benchmark against that. But if you take the EU as a whole, and I'll just remind everybody that the EU is a single market. It is one customs bloc. And if you look at it as EU's trade investment relations with India, we are India's biggest trading partner by far, accounting for more than 12% of total Indian trade. On top of that comes a very high number for services. It's $124 billion. The US and China, on the other hand, account for about 10%. So Europe is by far the biggest. And that has actually grown 90% over the past 10 years. And it goes both ways. Europe is also the number one investor in India, with a stock of about 140 billion euros in 2023. Again, up from only 80 billion back in 2019. So we are seeing a dramatic increase in European investments here in India. And I know, just looking at the Danish companies, how much they have invested in recent years. So we are seeing a clear trajectory. And those are not just investments in manufacturing capability centers. It of course also creates a lot of jobs here in India, benefiting the growth in this country and also your economic development. The EU and India are now working on a new strategic partnership roadmap that will go beyond 2025, where the current one by the end of this year expires. And we hope to strengthen cooperation in a number of areas, whether it's counterterrorism. I don't need to explain to anyone why that is important. Cybersecurity, maritime security, space, defense industry cooperation, and etc. So, in conclusion, from a Danish perspective, from a European perspective, we very much hope for stronger cooperation between the EU and India. And I think India and Europe are natural partners. Together, we make up a quarter of the world's population and also a quarter of the world's GDP. There's high complementarity in our economies. I think very large extent we have shared values. Europe, yes, we may be slow. We are also a little bit complicated to navigate in our institutional setup. We have institutions in Brussels, we have the member states. I know that can be sometimes difficult to navigate. Famously, quoting Henry Kissinger, said, Europe, who do I call? But when you find out who to call, Europe may be slow and complicated, but we are a reliable and predictable partner, and I hope India will agree with that. And again, looking forward to a stronger cooperation, not just between EU and India, but of course, perhaps even more important for me, between Denmark and India. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think you made a very strong case, as you should, for a strong India-EU partnership, India-Denmark partnership. And in the end, of course, you concluded with two words: predictability, predictable and reliable partner. And I think that's something that perhaps we can start the conversation with, because this is a discussion that Europe is having with regard to our traditional partner US, and this is a conversation many in India are having with regard to what is happening in Washington. Do you think what is happening with the American foreign policy at the moment makes India-EU partnership much more salient, and do you think that would also be a factor when issues like those that have been stuck for a while, like the FTA, for example, it might pave the way for some of those difficult decisions that are needed to be made, or is it something that is, something a kind of a bump on the road that perhaps will ease itself out and eventually will fall back to the same equilibrium? So, do you see this peculiar moment in global politics offering something to India and India and EU to take some of those hard decisions that perhaps are important and needed to be made for the sake of this partnership, but in particular also for the sake of FTA, because that had been hanging in the balance for a while?
It's a good question, and I think, as I mentioned, I referenced some numbers, and I think it may be interesting there to point out that, as I told you, bilateral trade between the EU and India has increased 80-90% over the past 5 years. Investment has grown about 50% from EU into India. Of course, some of that may be a reflection of certain geopolitical changes, but again, this has happened over the past 5 years. So I think, well, maybe to use a pretentious word, but there is maybe an element of destiny here that would have, appeared irrespective of what else is going on. Because, as I said, the two economies are, in fact, quite complementary. I think, again, let's disregard the global discussions on trade and simply look at what India can actually offer the world. And it can offer many of the same things that China could offer the world 20 years ago, in the sense that, as I said, it has scale. And it has scale in the sense that you can come here, you can manufacture, and you can export to the rest of the world. That's one leg. Other countries in the region, Southeast Asia, for example, can maybe offer some of the same things. But on top of that, India has what China also had, namely an interesting and fastly developing global, local market, domestic market. So you can also sell here. And I think those two things in combination, makes for an attractive value proposition for many European companies looking for new places to invest. So I think that would have happened anyway. Of course, what we have seen over the past, months and so forth, maybe has instilled a little bit more urgency into the negotiators on both sides. As I said, Europe in any case was looking to divest our economic relationships. We want more partners around the world. Europe made an agreement with the Latin American countries, Mercosur, which had been negotiated over the past years. That was concluded last year. So that's already in the books. And of course, India is the next place to look. But of course, with what what we've seen, I think there's a shared urgency on both sides. We also saw it perhaps between India and the UK. Of course, I cannot really comment, have any insights on that, but it's also my impression that it also started speeding up as people got a little more, let's not argue and bicker about commas here and there, but actually try to reach a compromise. So yes, I think if nothing else, then a higher degree of urgency, and therefore also perhaps a higher degree of willingness to compromise so that we can reach what would be a mutually beneficial agreement.
So you remain optimistic that under Danish presidency we will finally get the FTA?
Again, it's a EU Commission that negotiates, not me, unfortunately. But I remain optimistic. Whether it happens during our presidency, which will end by the end of December, or shortly into next year, maybe it doesn't matter so much, apart from hurt pride on our side. I think the key thing is that I'm quite optimistic that it will happen, and it will happen soon. And the fact that we have been negotiating this for 17 years, that's what, if you're want to play the devil's advocate, you could say, well, then maybe no grounds for optimism. And a lot of people said that in February, but I don't hear that anymore. And I think that's the difference, yeah.
Ambassador, one of the things that in your vision for EU presidency talks about is, of course, there is a lot of emphasis on security, and given what has been happening in the last few days in Washington, an attempt to move forward on the Ukrainian question. Can you reflect on that in some ways from a Danish or a European perspective, given that you have, as part of your presidency, talked about Europe as EU as a geopolitical actor, how you want to strengthen that capacity in partnership with NATO. How do you see that unfold over the next year or so, given the scale of change that is happening at all levels in Washington and Ukraine and Russia? Do you see an optimism about the European security architecture after this, or even there are doubts?
I certainly sense both optimism and resolve in Europe. But I think it's also fair to say that Europe has been, subjected to a pretty rough awakening in the past few years, and it didn't really start in January. It came way before that, both on the defense security side, but also on the economic side. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that we discovered that we had become maybe overly reliant on third parties outside Europe for our security, but also for our economic competitiveness. And both things basically needs to be fixed. So I think in Europe there is an understanding and a strong resolve, for example, to ensure that when it comes to security and defense, we can stand on our own feet and are able, for example, to defend ourselves. Of course, we will keep having partner. I think the transatlantic partnership will stand. NATO will continue to exist, no doubt about that. But Europe has to deliver more. We decided many years ago to try to harvest the peace dividend, and maybe that dividend was harvested a little too aggressively. But of course, the times are changing, and there is a strong commitment now to reverse course. And during the Danish EU presidency, we fully support the Commission's proposal on rearm Europe and increase our own capabilities within NATO. And
just in terms of the impact that Ukraine has had, of course, on the European thinking about defense and security, but in terms of specifics, in terms of what kind of a peace arrangement will you be happy with? Is that something that you can reflect on as of now, because things are in motion as we speak, or do you have a frame of reference that this is something that you can live with, given that Russia will remain where it is, and of course Ukraine's situation will remain a bit complicated, even if tomorrow there is a resolution of the seeming ceasefire or some resolution to the conflict?
Well, it's a complicated question. I think first and foremost, that is up to Ukraine and the Ukrainian government, what they through some sort of negotiation are willing to accept. And I think that's how it should be. It's not for others to say what the Ukrainians should or should not accept. But needless to say, there will, whatever solution or whatever, if a peace agreement could be found, then it would have to entail some sort of security guarantee for Ukraine, and that is, I think, had also been made very clear from the Ukrainian side.
Ambassador, on this, of course, on one side we have Mr. Trump and his administration, but on the other, and of course the issue of American reliability and American response to what is happening perhaps in their domestic politics. But on the other, we also have the issue of China and how that is impacting. And we have seen how European Union, one of the things that came up with changing EU is EU's greater interest in the Indo-Pacific. And particularly in the maritime space, we have seen a lot of activities by individual EU member states, but also EU as a unit. So when you look at the Indo-Pacific, when you look at this side of the geography, of world's geography, and you look at a rising power like China, in sometimes challenging, at times working in tandem with other countries, what is your assessment of how things may unfold and how EU should or should not react to some of these developments?
Well, if we look at the Indo-Pacific, of course, there is, whether we like it or not, there is a link between European security and security in the Indo-Pacific. Also because the strong trade relations between Europe and Asia, the sea lanes that connects us, that of course needs to be protected, and for whatever threat could be envisaged, India and the EU is already cooperating on some of these things, including anti-piracy operations, the threat from the Houthis and so forth. All this is threatening some of the connectivity points between our two continents, and therefore, needless to say, the Indo-Pacific and security in the Indo-Pacific is also in the interest of Europe to promote. Yes.
Finally, before I open this up for everyone's inputs, questions, comments, and observations, so please keep them ready. I just had one final question on India-Denmark partnership, and which has been defined as the first green partnership that India has had with any country. What are some of the benchmarks that you would judge this green partnership by? Because you mentioned some of the things in your opening remarks, but how far do you think that partnership has moved, and do you see accelerating some aspects of that partnership, particularly in the green domain?
No, I think still that there is a lot of promise in that partnership. Our aim, certainly in the years to come, is actually to double down on some of these green priorities, because we do sense that the challenges also for India are quite big. So are they for Europe? And again, climate change being the most consequential challenge we all face, we are natural partners in that endeavor. So the whole idea is that some of the things that we have been working on, whether it's pilot projects or pilot initiatives, will now be scaled up in the years to come. And again, India has that opportunity, and if we could do it here, then we could do it everywhere. So yes, that will be the key words.
Thank you. Let me open this up for your questions, comments, observations. If you can raise your hands, I can see the range of questions from across the room. So I will start from this end and I'll move to this end. And we will take 3 questions at a time. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Namaskar, Your Excellency. My name is Utkarsh Garg, currently pursuing BA Honours Research from International Relations from Amity University, Noida. And thank you for giving us, first of all, thank you for giving us this insightful conversation. I have 1 or 2 questions. First question is that India and Denmark have improved their relations a lot. And how do you... Denmark is also one of the maritime countries which is working on its maritime security and maritime trade. How do you see India's partnership with Denmark in the maritime security, in the maritime sector and in the Arctic Ocean, and also related to the Indo-Pacific? Second is, how do you see the people-to-people ties between the two countries, as in the past few years we have seen the development in the relations between the two countries. So how do you see people-to-people connections rising, and how, as youth is also getting engaged in the diplomacy, so how do you see in the lens, and what is the future of India-Denmark relations?
He basically wants to go and study in Denmark. I think that's what he wants.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and thank you, ORF, for this. I am a research associate here at the Dr. Ambedkar International Center. My question is regarding offshore energy. So last year in November, India reached a significant milestone we achieved around 200 gigawatts of energy production from non-fossil fuels. And this aligns with our ambitious renewable energy target also of around 500 gigawatts. We see that Denmark is a pioneer in offshore energy production, with the first offshore energy fields also being set up in Denmark. So my question is that how do you see Danish companies scaling that expertise in India's coastal regions, because we have about 11,000 kilometers of coastline here in India? Thank you.
And yes, and the gentleman here.
Thank you, Excellency, for your wonderful insight. My name is Saurabh Kumar, and I am an undergraduate student from University of Delhi. My question is on India imports oil from Russia, and the concern repeatedly expressing by the European country. But it is not hidden that European itself imports oil from Russia. And now Europe preaches to us that India should not import oil from Russia. So how do you justify this double standard? Or do you think that only India when oil imports from Russia, then it only fuel war machine in Ukraine, despite of the fact that India always called for dialogue and diplomacy?
Okay.
So how do you justify
I think
double
to be
standard?
fair, it's the Americans who are asking now about the question. I think Europeans have stopped asking that question. So, but I'll, Ambassador, go ahead.
Thank you. Let me actually start with the last question. And again, I cannot comment on anything but what is the European position here, what is the Danish position. And I think it's a clear European position that we want to not just reduce, but eliminate our import of fossil fuels from Russia. That's where we would like to go, and we have managed to reduce our imports, by I think almost 90% over the past 3 years. In terms of the sanctions, it's important to remember that we are basically sanctioning ourselves. So what the Europeans are saying is that we do not want to import, for example, oil, also if it comes from a third country. So what we're just saying is we prohibit the import of refined oil products from, for example, India. So we're not saying that India cannot import oil. You can do whatever you like, but you can just not sell it or pass it on and then resell it to Europe. That's what we're saying. So you see, there's a bit of a nuance here. So we are saying that we don't want to have it. So actually, I think the European logic is quite consistent. We want to reduce our imports of Russian oil. On maritime affairs, I think in the whole maritime domain, India has a bright future in front of itself. You have a strategic position in the globe, and you are already the center of numerous, transport corridors and sea lanes. And as India keeps developing, this will only grow in importance. And at the same time, I think going forward, India could also become a hub for shipbuilding. It could be a hub for recycling ships in a sustainable way. And more importantly, perhaps it can become a hub for delivering the clean fuels that the maritime sector will need in the years to come. This is still something that is in its nascent phase, but it will accelerate, and it will accelerate fast in the years to come. The Danish shipping company Maersk already have, I think, almost 20 e-methanol ships. They are among the first of the shipping companies to order these ships, and they are looking for suppliers of clean fuels for these ships. And India is extremely well positioned to become such a supplier. So certainly we would do what we can together with other partners to help India grow its competence within the maritime sphere. And I think this is an area that really has a great promise. I think on top of that, we already have, and maybe that links to the next question on people-to-people relations. There are already more than 10,000 Indian seafarers on Danish ships. So I think that's a fun little fact that also binds us together. On people-to-people relations, Indians are the fastest growing migrant group in Denmark and has been for a number of years. The average Indian person in Denmark earns more than the average Dane. So your countrymen who goes to Denmark are doing extremely well. and you are highly appreciated members of our society. We are happy to have you. And by having such a migrant community, it also binds the countries together. We learn more about Indian culture. More Danes develop an appetite for coming here as tourists, or perhaps even come here and work. So I think that's very positive, and we expect that that development to continue. More professionals going to Denmark, but of course also more students coming to Denmark to tap into some of our educational resources. We certainly have strongholds, especially within a number of areas like renewable energy, or that might be of interest to Indian students, where we are absolute world class. On offshore wind, which is a good question, and that has been the center of some of our cooperation on the energy side. Again, I think it's a good match. A little bit overlooked perhaps globally. India was actually one of the pioneers when it comes to wind energy 20, 30 years ago. Land-based wind, of course. You still have very strong companies like Suslon and others who are doing well both here and globally. The next step, at least for India, would of course be to also look at the offshore opportunities. It's not always easy, and I think we have experienced that in Denmark as well. If you go back and look at the first offshore wind tenders 20 years ago, it was very expensive. But over the years, the price have come down gradually, and offshore wind will also over time become fully competitive with many other energy forms, and already is today. And again, if you can bring it to scale here in India, the price will come down even further. Of course, not all places along that 16,000 kilometer or 6,000 kilometer coastline is suitable for offshore wind, but there are some really good spots in Tamil Nadu, for example, but also in Gujarat. But of course, we saw some of the tenders being cancelled a few weeks ago, and it has to do, and we've experienced that in Denmark too, and it has to do with finding this perfect equilibrium in terms of how much subsidy you provide to make it happen, but where it also remains attractive for the investors to come in. And again, I think our experience have been that the first tender is more expensive, and then the second one becomes cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and this is the only way to move forward. This is also how solar has developed in India. I think that was...
I'm Manish Sharma. I'm working as an analyst. So my basic question is that we are finding that as far as Europe is concerned, it is considered to be excessively regulated as far as innovations are concerned on big tech, etc. Especially in times when artificial intelligence, data centers, etc. are basically being, are getting, innovative and for coming up on scale, And while on the second hand, we are also finding that some of the, industries, for example, in Germany, for example, electric vehicles are coming in and they are basically challenging the old legacy companies like Mercedes, BMW, etc. So how is Europe going to maintain balance, because sooner or later, even these Vestas of Denmark are also going to face similar kind of challenge. So, that's the point, how is Digital Market Act, going to be, regulated so that, it can basically bring innovation also, and it can check, the entire, what you call, as far as US companies are concerned, basically, they stop dominating, for example, Microsoft, Google, etc., as far as on democracy, society, on businesses, etc., so that they are able to, we can have a much more, artificial intelligence, all these technologies can basically develop in a harmonious way. Thanks.
Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for your presentation. I'm Sumeer Bhasin. I'm a geopolitical analyst. I have two questions. One is, are Europe, UK, and the US aligned as far as your security concerns, as far as Ukraine is concerned? Is your issues and concerns aligned in addressing that? Your approach towards the peace deal. Second is that Europe has increased its defense budget to 5%. What do you see going down the line of this extra securitization? What will be the impact within Europe?
Thank you, Excellency, for a wonderful conversation for us. I am Karthik Lal. I am currently pursuing my Masters in Politics and International Relations from Central University of Punjab. So my question is that, so what is the viewpoint of Denmark in CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism policy of European Union? And in the sense that India is one of the largest trading partner of European Union in the sense, and also it hampers the trade relations between the European Union after implementation of this policy also. How can be this green politics and this trade relations be balanced?
Good questions. Regulation. You're perfectly right. I think it was a standing joke last year at the World Economic Forum. People were saying that, if you look at the world's China will get the jobs, the Americans will get the technology, and Europe will make the rules, or has the rules, right? And that was not meant as in over-regulation. And I think that's partly true. Certainly, it's one of the priorities for the Danish EU presidency to ease the regulatory burden for our companies, because there is a realization throughout Europe that maybe we have had a tendency of over-regulating in past years, and that for many companies, just the reporting alone has become cumbersome and difficult. So that will be dealt with, and I think Commission President von der Leyen has also made that very clear that this is a priority for her new cabinet and during this Commission period. Specifically on artificial intelligence, IT, so forth. Of course, it could be argued that the AI Act is again an example of over-regulation, but at the same time, I think from a European perspective, you also want to make sure we strike a good balance, because there are some legitimate concerns, I think, when it comes to some of our values and the way that AI could be deployed. On the one hand, and of course the need to allow for helpful innovation and taking economic advantage of the possibility of this technology. But Europe is still at a place where we want to make sure that we also take other factors into consideration and not just leave it to tech companies to do whatever they like, to a point where, as we all know, maybe we can no longer control it. So I think that's where Europe comes from. I think from a specific Danish perspective, we are erring a little bit more on the side of innovation, and I think in general, I mean, we are among the most innovative and competitive economies of Europe, and we can certainly see the potential of AI in many fields. So it's not just about social media and these things that have very much been discussed in the European Parliament, but it's also about what can that bring to us within healthcare, within manufacturing, education, many other places that would also actually tremendously benefit development and progress for us humans. So that was regulation. Defense budgets, what will it do for Europe? I know that, of course, it has been discussed, can Europe afford it? Well, can be discussed. Certainly, in Northern Europe, it's a question of priority. I don't think there will be a trade-off between can we keep our current welfare and then at the same time rearm. The two things can to some extent go hand in hand. And we already see a number of European countries, Poland, for example, that has had the highest growth in Europe for many years, is already investing almost 5%. Of course, it will to some extent be a challenge, but and in many ways. But the determination in Europe is, I think, is certainly there. Also because as part of the 5% commitment, it's not all just guns and ammunition. Some of it is also a little bit wider understanding of security that could be used in other aspects as well, like civil preparedness and these things. So whether it's a natural disaster or war we're talking about, it would benefit us. Finally, on CBAM, which I know has been discussed here in India, but I think it's important to understand what it is and where it comes from. So, as you may know, in Europe we have. We use carbon credits within the European Union, where the polluter has to pay, and the problem and the reason for that is that when we put a price on carbon, that forces our companies to innovate and adopt sustainable low carbon solutions, including in some of the hard to abate industries. If you don't do that, no technological development or innovation will take place, no decarbonization will take place, and doing it through the market is the most efficient way to promote it. I think has been the realization in Europe. The only problem with that is, of course, that if you put a high price on carbon in Europe, many of the more carbon intensive industries will simply say, fine, then we just leave Europe and set up production somewhere else. either near Europe in Turkey or some other place, or you start importing from other countries. So you kill your own industries and just allow other countries to produce. So that is the reasoning behind CBAM. We cannot allow for this kind of carbon leakage where the companies just slip out and produce somewhere else. So therefore, we have to sort of tax carbon intensive imports into Europe. And I think that makes perfect sense. This is the only way forward. But that being said, there is a discussion, of course, in Brussels at the moment, and some revised legislation has already been adopted that has to make the whole administrative system around it a lot easier, so we don't punish small, medium-sized enterprises, whether they are exporting here from India or in Europe when they're importing. So it has to be done in a good way. And I don't think anyone claims that we have found a perfect solution, but I think the key thing here is just to understand the principle behind it. Why are we doing this, and why does it ultimately make sense if we want to promote, technological innovation and decarbonization, not just in Europe but globally?
Thank you so much, Ambedkar International Center, ORF, and Danish Embassy for providing us the stage to gather here. My question to sir is that you have also mentioned in your address about water management and sustainable urban development are two Danish, strengths. So could you share some examples of collaborations with Indian cities in specifics in these fields, and what are the conventional and also modern means could be brought up together for this?
I am Group Captain Srinivasan. After spending 6 months in India, have you worked out some kind of a roadmap as to what are the areas you'd like to focus when it comes to Denmark-India relations? Secondly, when it comes to following an independent policy of Denmark versus India, do you feel any constraints because of the overarching policies of the EU, where you have to adhere to the EU's policies also as compared to your own views as an independent country?
Thank you, ORF and Ambassador, for your insights. Myself, Seelam Kushal Chandra Royal, undergraduate, Political Science, University of Delhi. My question is, how does you see Denmark's and India's partnership in sustainable practices like organic farming and etc.?
Yeah, thank you. On water, I think we're proud to say that we are among probably India's preferred foreign partners when it comes to water. We're the only foreign country partner to the Jal Jeevan mission. We have an smart lab center in Varanasi, focusing on cleaning up the Ganges, wastewater treatment. So it's basically the whole water value chain, if you like, from mapping and managing groundwater, preventing salt intrusion into the aquifers, to how you distribute the water, prevent water loss into rivers, cleaning up of rivers, wastewater treatment, and so forth. So the whole cycle is in the Danish corporation. Therefore, we also have various partners. On the city level, it's currently very much focused on a number of cities in Rajasthan. We just simply chose, we need to go somewhere, and we started there. But that is now spreading to other places as well, from Udaipur and Jaipur to now other cities throughout India. Other work is in the rural areas. Some of it together with UNOPS, the UN system. Others with Indian NGOs like the Sankala Foundation or NGOs in the eastern part of India. So I think it's a very good broad spectrum of and different kinds of cooperation targeting all the many areas where water matters. Again, from conservation to treating wastewater, and how it also links with other things like energy and agriculture and so forth. And I think we are learning a lot from it, and hopefully our Indian partners are inspired as well. On focus areas in the years to come, again, as I said in the beginning, I think the strategic partnership we have with India is strategic because it is comprehensive. So we will keep working on all the areas that I mentioned, in whether it's in healthcare, in science, technology, food, agriculture, and so forth. But of course, there are a couple of areas where I see perhaps an even greater potential, and where we feel that there is a unique unique match, and maybe where Denmark is seen as having some experiences, some skills that India is very eager to tap into, and of course that would be within energy. Maybe here looking at clean fuels, bioenergy, hydrogen, wind. It is in water, as we just discussed, and then perhaps also in the maritime sphere, where Denmark and a few other countries like Norway and so on again have very unique skills and experiences that, as India builds up its own industry in that area, we are natural partners. So those would maybe be the particular focus areas. More in the abstract, I think again the idea now is to double down on some of the things that are working and bring them to scale, and then also perhaps going forward start working more on some of the areas that require more trust between the countries. And I think that trust is there now. So that could be emerging tech or even defense. We'll see. But anyway, that could be a way forward. There was a question then on, does EU sort of constrain the bilateral relationship between Denmark and India? I don't think so. And I think that's the beauty of the European project, that over the years we've managed to fine-tune this cooperation model where the EU does what works best, in the sense of where all the European countries together, again, for example, when it comes to free trade agreements, should come as a united bloc. And of course, where India, imagine if you had to negotiate a free trade agreement with all European states, so that's, that would be a nightmare, right? Now we just need to negotiate with Brussels. So I think that's a good example of where it works. Then there are other areas where it makes more sense that we approach and cooperate with India bilaterally. I just mentioned some of them. At the same time, in some of those areas, you also have EU cooperation. So I think it's complementary. It can run in parallel, and no particular problem in that. And then finally, organic farming. Yeah, that was the last question. We don't actually do anything specifically on organic farming in India, although that is something that we work a lot of back in Denmark. But within food and agriculture, our focus is on especially on milk, dairy, which is India is the world's biggest dairy producer. Denmark is also a very big dairy producer. So there we work together to also make the Indian sector perhaps more efficient. So how you can produce more milk with the same input and increase the quality. So that's an example of a focus area when it comes to agriculture.
I know there are some more in this segment, so I think the lady here.
Namaste, His Excellency. Namaste, Mr. Pant. A very cheerful question. What did you like about Delhi, and what did you like about the other cities you got a chance to visit? And one question, could you tell me more about the waste management of green energy instruments? That is all. And sir, sir, wishing you a memorable and a very rewarding stay in India.
Good evening. I'm Shraddha Yadav, an undergraduate student in Hindu College, University of Delhi. So I wanted to ask about the rise of the so-called international cancel culture in international relations, which is not being very effective in solving conflicts, particularly the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Do you think that the EU needs to revisit or revamp its diplomatic methods and channels to resolve conflicts?
Sir, my question is that in your opening remark, you mentioned that EU is a slow but a reliable partner. As a nation, we also living in a one bubble that Washington is a predictable and reliable partner, but now they brushed east. So, in your discretion, what are some policy and things that make India believe that EU will be always remain a reliable and predictable partner of India?
Very tough question for all nations to answer. In international relations, yes, it's very difficult. I think let's get this question, and then I think we are done with this. Then we'll move there.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, sir. Good evening, His Excellency. I have a question. Europe is mostly composed of developed nations. Then how do you intend to prove your credibility to manage climate change whilst the Arctic Ocean is facing the brunt of climate change most aggressively? I also have another question. I don't know if it is right for you to answer or not, but we have seen that Mr. Trump is imposing tariff on a lot of countries right now, including ourselves, including Europe. But they actually have not threatened us or our sovereignty. But that is not the case with you, because Mr. Trump has told that he intends to buy Greenland. And we have not had any responses from Denmark on it. So could you wish to respond to that?
Well, I think they have responded, but he can respond on Denmark's behalf once again.
From the beginning, what do I like about Delhi? A lot of things. I think first and foremost, I like the fact that the city is green. I mean, in terms of, foliage, tree coverage. I attended a small event yesterday in a hotel where we were on the 25th floor. And I just realized I haven't actually been that high in Delhi before. And then I remember I have been in similar settings, many places in the world. I was posted in Jakarta before coming here, Indonesia. I was in China for many years, Europe, the US. And I just realized standing there on the 20th floor looking over Delhi, my God, it's just green. You cannot hardly see any buildings. It's just covered in trees. And I really like it. That's something I really like about Delhi and India. And of course, it doesn't come by itself. It's part of your culture, but also regulated. I understand I cannot chop down a tree in my residence compound without asking for permission. I think that's something we should adopt in Denmark. That would be good. So I think that's something I certainly appreciate. On top of that, of course, what I like about India is its immense cultural diversity, its history, its fantastic food, and you go to different parts of India and you are in different. It's like being in different countries, and still you're within India. You feel there's an Indian vibe, but you are still in different parts, and I think that's incredibly rewarding and stimulating. Waste. We don't have a specific or dedicated waste cooperation with India. We do have that with other countries. Maybe that's something we should consider. Of course, it's a global problem. Plastic, just to mention that, has very much been in the media just the last few days. We talk about the attempts to make an international, agreement on reducing plastic waste. But how to deal with it? If you look at the Danish experience there, it's actually quite interesting, because if you go back 30 years, almost 90% or something of Danish waste would end up in a landfill. That's no longer the case today. Only about 2% of our waste end up in a landfill, and it's mainly some waste from building construction sites, that kind of thing. But what happens then to the rest of the waste? Going back 20 years ago, we started investing in waste-to-energy plants, so incinerators that basically burns the waste. And of course, this is something we also have been met with here. Questions: is that a way forward for India? Perhaps, but I would urge a little caution here, because I think for us that has actually largely turned out to be a mistake. We over-invested in waste-to-energy plants and incinerators 20 years ago. So now we find ourselves in a completely absurd situation where in Denmark we have to import waste. Who would have thought? So waste produced
Importing waste from India might be an option.
Exactly. So of course, the distance is a bit far. So actually, we imported mainly from, well, to some extent from Germany, but mainly from the UK. So waste generated by households and industry in Sheffield and Nottingham and what have you are now being sailed to Denmark to be incinerated, and that is of course a completely ridiculous business model. But it has to do with the fact that we have the facilities, we invested in them, and now they stand there. So why do we have to import waste? Well, we have to import waste because we do not produce enough waste ourselves. And that has to do with recycling. So I think the Danish politicians completely underestimated 20 years ago how far we could get with recycling, of plastic, of organic waste, of what have you, and make use of it in other ways. And therefore, there is simply not enough waste to incinerate locally, and we have to import it. So be careful when you start buying these big, hungry incinerators. Maybe you can actually get very far with recycling. And I think there is something in Indian culture that could also maybe lead to that conclusion. Then there was something on EU and Denmark's. I forgot what was that. I cannot read my own handwriting here. Now, remind me. Are we a reliable partner? I very much think so. I think the European project in itself is, testament to a European desire for a rules-based international order. We make promises, we make commitments, and we stand by them. And that goes within Europe, but it also goes in our relations with other countries. So is there any examples where we haven't? I cannot easily recall, at least. So if we make a trade agreement, we'll stick with it, right? So hopefully you'll find that Europe is a reliable partner. But again, as I said in my initial remarks, I think the numbers speak for themselves. The two EU and India should be complementary and good partners for each other. We have a lot to offer each other, and we are certainly eager to develop that relationship. Climate change. European countries, yes, we are developed countries, part of the global north, if you like. But I think we can also safely say that although we still have a lot of homework to do and we are in no way there, we have also made quite a bit of progress over the years. So if you look at the emissions per capita, compared to China, the US, we are much, much lower despite being developed countries. So that's an example of some of the things we have done. And hopefully, at least from a Danish perspective, we fully support the Commission's proposals for a 90% reduction by 2040. And then we will slowly getting there. If you look at just at the Danish example, I think we are well on track when it comes to our energy system. So by 2030, our energy system is basically decarbonized. Our transport sector will be basically decarbonized. So the only thing we have left, but that's also a difficult one, is agriculture. We are still an agricultural farming nation to a large extent. In terms of employment, a small part of the economy, but still, in terms of emissions, that's what is left. And that's, of course, incredibly difficult because you have emissions, methane coming out of the animal husbandry, you have emissions coming out of the plants and so forth, and there are no easy solutions to that. A few other sectors, maritime, air transport, and so on, are also difficult, but we'll get there too. So that's hopefully what Europe tries to convey to the world and try to inspire others to follow that route, even if some now are questioning whether that's the right way. But I don't think that's the case in Europe. Finally, Greenland. I think the Danish government and the Danish Prime Minister has made it very clear that Greenland's status is basically up to the Greenlanders, and I think that's a key thing. We have to remember there are people living there. There are 70,000 people living on Greenland. The future is theirs. So whatever they decide is what we will have to accept.
We are running out of time, but if you can quickly do the questions on this side because they've been waiting. So you can start, I think, from here and then the gentleman here.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for taking time out for this interaction. I'm Karthik, Senior Fellow with the Observer Research Foundation. Europe's defense industry is very fragmented. What are European countries doing to consolidate national capabilities? Do you believe Airbus, which is today a major aircraft manufacturer, should or will serve as the template for the way Europe will consolidate its defense industry? Thank you.
Excellency, earlier we used to study in chemistry and physics contribution of Danish scientists in atom. But recently I don't see any contribution of Danish scientists in any science, and they are not being recognized by Nobel Prize also. And second thing about our recent...
He's asking what is the state of Danish science and technology.
Recently, the way we find the whole world is in disorder, do you think it's because of failure of UN, or some people are not following rules as per human rights? The way Putin and Trump has met in recent meeting, and Putin is the main gainer of this thing, and whole Europe, we feel let down.
Thank you. I'm Barshan Karmakar, PhD research scholar from Defense and Strategic Studies, Amity University. Your Excellency, as you have stated a lot about the aspect of security, so now from the end of the US administration, we have seen that President Trump has paused his cooperation and his approach in terms of defense to the Europe in several contexts. So now, as research and development, as a defense cooperation, and considering the security needs as Europe sees to it, so how do you consider the role of India and the role of the Indian industries and to expand research and development and expand the cooperation in the field of defense and strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have one more round left, so we'll take final round of questions once this is over.
Yeah, thank you. So I heard basically two questions on the defense industry. So I'll just sort of lump them together. Yes, perfectly right. European defense industry is or has been fragmented for a number of reasons, and I think there is a realization in Europe that that needs to change. I'm not an expert, and exactly how to do it is of course another question. No doubt that the Airbus model is actually a very good example, and we have also other examples in the past of joint defense cooperation among the private sector in Europe, whether it's in fighter planes or other capabilities, and I think we will see more of that in the years to come. That's also the ambition, and I think that flows from the Commission's Rearm Europe proposal that we need more of that, simply to achieve scale and also ensure fewer platforms, because that is of course the difference between the Americans and the Europeans, that the Americans only have a few platforms in their military, whereas in Europe we have more. It's all NATO compatible, but still there is some also from a cost perspective value in having fewer platforms and more cooperation. So I think we will see that in the years to come. Could India play a role in this? I think so, and that's certainly something both sides will explore bilaterally. I think that is being done already, but also at EU level. I can certainly say from a Danish perspective that we have Danish companies who are already on the defense side, working in India, because it's not just Europe that is looking for beefing up capabilities. So is India, and you also had some recent experiences where you have maybe realized that there are a few things where you need to further invest. I think that's only natural, and so have we in Europe, and I think that there's a space there that we can perhaps explore going forward. Science, technology. If I understood the question correctly, it's what's the status of the Danish sort of scientific community? I think it's doing quite well. As I think you also mentioned, we got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry just 2 years ago. But more generally, if you look at the quality of the research output, also from Danish universities, it's quite high, and we are still among the most innovative countries in Europe. And also there is scope for collaboration between our countries. India also, when it comes to science technology, has a lot to offer. We have, as I said, an innovation center in Bangalore. There's a strong cooperation between Danish and Indian universities. We are doing joint research calls on areas of mutual interest, and typically in Danish strongholds. So it's in hydrogen, it's in water, it's in other kinds of renewable technologies. But again, going forward, it could be in other areas as well. Quantum, for example, quantum computing is a Danish stronghold. The Niels Bohr Institute is in Denmark. That could be another area to explore, perhaps. Let's see, what was the... Sorry? Yeah. UN, exactly. Denmark is currently a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, and as part of our agenda for the Security Council, upholding the rules-based international order is a key priority, and I think it's safe to say that's not just a Danish priority, but it's a European priority, and it will remain so. I think that has served us well. It's never perfect. It never has been perfect, but we need to safeguard it by all means.
So our final round. You can let me first complete here. So please, if you can be very, very brief in your questions and comments, so that we can have everyone captured.
I find blatant contradiction between what the Europe is saying about Washington and what it is expecting from United States. Both privately and publicly, European leaders are saying that United States is not a reliable partner or ally. But on Ukraine, again, it is seeking security of United States. How do you reconcile this contradiction?
Hi, Excellency. This is Abhishek Jha. I'm an independent journalist. I have just two quick questions. You said that EU and India have been negotiating this free trade agreement for the last 17 years. It looks very difficult, especially in the wake of India-Russia trade, which has not gone down well with the European partners. And will the FTA happen with the current relationship, trade and security relationship that India has with Russia, which is kind of now a very enemic state to the European Union? Also, in Gaza, we have seen almost in the war for 2 years, there have been tens of thousands of killings with impunity from the Israeli side. European leaders have, in the recent weeks, condemned those actions, but there has not been any sanctioning or banning, something that European nations consider as a tool to implement something against Israel. So, you have any take on the Israeli action, and how do Europe see it?
I think we have one final from this side, and then.
Good evening. I'm Hiren Kotak from Gujarat. I'm columnist and a spokesperson for ruling party in Gujarat. My only question is, what can Denmark offer to entrepreneurs in India's dairy industry, and what can Denmark do to make India's dairy industry more efficient?
Hello, Excellency. Good to hear you here. My question is that recently Alaska summit has happened and President Putin and Trump has met. But the country which is fighting since and suffering since from the 2 and 3 year and didn't even invited to present their concerns at the Alaska summit. So is it the President Trump is the real representative of European Union or the European countries? On behalf of them, he is negotiating the deals, he is negotiating the peace talks, etc.
Good evening. My word of welcome to Ambassador Rasmus. And having worked with Larsen and Toubro for a long time, I have an affinity for Denmark. So I will very specifically ask about the Danish connection. Like the FTA has been working on for last 15 to 17 years, like what people say. And can you identify at least the 3 areas where, India, Denmark, which are very close and very akin to each other? They can work on only these 3 areas and the FTA is signed. So we have time till December and we look forward to that. Thank you.
So can you solve the FTA problem? This is a tight knot to resolve.
Allow me also here perhaps to lump a few questions together. Replying to a couple of questions, I think it's important to understand that the transatlantic partnership is still very important for us in Europe, and we'll do what we can to keep it that way. So that hasn't really changed. And I think from a European perspective, we also do understand that we need to take more responsibility for our own security. That is perhaps the new thing. When it comes to, I have no particular comment on the Alaska meeting, but maybe just, there was a meeting in Washington yesterday, which had another lined up, as you see. So maybe that answers the question. The FTA, again, 2 questions on that. I don't see any contradiction with the FTA between Europe and India. The negotiations are can stand in their own right. And again, as I said, India and Europe, the complementarity between our economies, we would have a mutual interest in reaching a deal. It has been going on for 17 years. I think that's maybe a reflection of 2 things. First of all, that such negotiations are very complicated and technical. So answering your question, I don't think there are any quick fixes. Also because from a European perspective, we want an ambitious deal. Not ambitious as understood in where we make unrealistic demands, but ambitious in its coverage. So we don't end up with this kind of very, very light deal that just covers 2 or 3 things and then we're done. Because then the experience is that we never come back and reopen it and get the ambitious deal. So it's important we get it right from the beginning. And of course, that takes time. These negotiations are incredibly complex. And again, it's the European Commission that negotiates, not the member states or me. So what exactly we should focus on, I don't particularly know. I think we simply close them chapter by chapter. And that's also the right way forward. It's a systematic methodological approach. But I think what has changed, again, is, as I said in the beginning, it's the sense of urgency, number 1. Number 2, also maybe a better understanding of each other's positions. I think in Europe we have also come to understand that it will be a different kind of deal than, let's say, the deal EU made with New Zealand. India and New Zealand are not comparable cases, and they require different approaches. We understand that, and I think maybe India has also come to understand that, you know, if you want access to what is in fact still one of the world's biggest economies, the European Union, then, you know, that requires something else than if you negotiate with a small country, right? So where the focus can be more narrow. Then it has to be comprehensive. It has to be ambitious. But again, then combined with the urgency, I remain optimistic that we can reach a deal. Finally, on dairy, it's very technical, but it has to do with everything from stable technology to animal health. Basically, how you can get more milk out of one cow. I think if you look at the output of a typical Danish cow, it's considerably higher, and there are reasons for that. In Denmark, by the way, all our cows are. We don't do animal husbandry for beef, for eating beef. It's for dairy. So they're all dairy cows. And the output is generally quite high. There are a number of reasons for that. Again, animal health, but also some of the technologies used in stables and so forth. And that is what we are trying to achieve here through some pilot projects and cooperation with the Ministry of Animal Husbandry, Fisheries, and so forth.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Gaza, it's as you rightly pointed out yourself. I can just refer to the statements being made in recent weeks by European leaders, including my own Prime Minister.
Thank you, Ambassador, for being very generous with your time. And you were very panoramic in your view to begin with, but then you had to come down to the nitty-gritty of dairy products and how do you enhance relationship through specific measures. But you answered all of our questions very patiently and thoughtfully. Thank you so much. And I hope and I wish the Danish presidency of the EU well. And I hope it concludes on a high note with the FTA. I think a lot of the people perhaps are expecting that and hoping that happens. So our best wishes, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. It was a
all
pleasure. Thank you for excellent questions.
It was great to have you despite the rains outside. So you gave, I think a lot of this has to do with your charm. But I think thank you so much. Thank you so much. And please join us for high tea.